The microphone hissed once before settling into silence, and I stood there, champagne flute trembling in my grip, staring at my father's red face across the ballroom. 300 guests sat frozen between their salmon entrees and wedding cake, eyes darting from him to me like spectators at a tennis match no one wanted to watch. He'd just called me a failure on my wedding day, in the middle of his toast, voice dripping with the same contempt he'd used when I dropped out of his business school pipeline 5 years ago. But in exactly 4 minutes, Gerald Hastings would walk through those double doors with a leather portfolio, and my father would learn that the failure he mocked had quietly become his majority shareholder overnight.
6 hours earlier, I'd been standing in the bridal suite of the Riverside Manor, hands steady as I fastened my cufflinks, silver, engraved with my initials, a gift from Claire's grandmother. Sunlight streamed through the bay windows, catching the dust motes in the air, and I could hear the string quartet warming up in the garden below. My best man, Eric, was adjusting his tie in the mirror, humming something off-key. "You nervous?" he asked, grinning at my reflection. "Not about marrying Claire," I said. "About the other thing." Eric's grin faded. He crossed the room, lowered his voice. "You really went through with it? The shares?" I nodded. The deal had closed at 11:47 p.m. the night before, 47 minutes after I'd signed the final transfer documents in Gerald Hastings' law office, my hand cramping from the sheer volume of paperwork. My father's company, Whitmore Industries, had been hemorrhaging value for 2 years, ever since the board lost confidence in his leadership and he'd refused to step down. Investors were bailing. I'd spent 18 months quietly buying distressed shares through shell corporations, then consolidated them at midnight into my own name. 51%, controlling interest. "Does he know?" Eric asked. "Not yet." "Jesus, man. Today?" "He insisted on giving a toast," I said, voice flat. "I tried to tell him not to. Claire tried. But you know how he is." Eric did know. Everyone who'd ever worked for Richard Whitmore knew. My father measured worth in quarterly earnings and Ivy League degrees, and when I'd walked away from Harvard Business after 2 semesters to start a software consultancy from my apartment, he'd stopped returning my calls. The consultancy had grown, slowly, into something real. 30 employees, 8-figure revenue, a reputation for solving problems legacy companies couldn't. But to him, I was still the dropout who'd embarrassed him at the country club. Claire appeared in the doorway, dress a cascade of ivory silk, eyes bright. "Ready?" I crossed to her, took her hands. "More than ready." She studied my face. "You look like you're about to rob a bank." "Close," I said, and kissed her forehead. The ceremony was perfect. Claire's vows made half the crowd cry. Mine made her laugh. And when we walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, I felt lighter than I had in years. The reception kicked off with champagne toasts and a first dance that I only half botched. And for 2 blissful hours, I forgot about the folder sitting in Gerald's briefcase 3 blocks away. Then, the toasts began. Claire's father went first, warm, funny, welcoming me into the family, with a story about the first time I'd come to dinner and accidentally called their cat by the dog's name. Her maid of honor followed with a tearful tribute to their friendship. Then Eric stood, cleared his throat, delivered a perfectly calibrated mix of roast and sentiment that had the room laughing and clapping. And then my father rose. He didn't ask. He just stood, glass in hand, and tapped a fork against the crystal until the room quieted. I felt Claire's hand tighten on mine under the table. "I wasn't planning to speak," he began, voice carrying across the ballroom with the ease of a man used to boardrooms and podiums. "But seeing my son here, on what should be the proudest day of his life, I feel compelled." A few polite chuckles. I kept my face neutral. "When Daniel was young, I had such high hopes. Brilliant mind, real potential. I thought, here's a boy who could take over the family business, build something lasting." He paused, swirled his champagne. "But potential means nothing without follow-through." The room went still. "He quit Harvard, Walked away from every advantage I gave him to what? Fiddle with computers in a basement? A smattering of uncomfortable laughter. I've watched him waste his talents for 5 years now, chasing some fantasy of independence instead of stepping up to real responsibility. And Claire, lovely Claire, I hope you know what you're getting into, because failure, I'm afraid, runs deeper than resumes. Silence. Someone coughed. Claire's hand was a vice on mine under the table. My father raised his glass. To the happy couple, may Daniel's marriage be more successful than his career choices. A few people clinked glasses out of sheer awkwardness. Most just stared. I stood slowly, legs steadier than I expected. Picked up my champagne flute. My father smirked, like he'd won something. Thank you, Dad, I said, voice calm. For that, perspective. I glanced at the double doors. Right on cue, they swung open. Gerald Hastings stepped through, 62, silver-haired, briefcase in hand. He scanned the room, found me, nodded once. Before I respond, I continued, eyes back on my father. I think there's someone here you should meet.
My father's smirk faltered as Gerald approached the head table. The lawyer moved with quiet authority, the kind that comes from 40 years of closing deals that reshape fortunes. He stopped beside me, set the briefcase on the table, and clicked it open with a sound that seemed to echo in the silent ballroom. Mr. Whitmore, Gerald said, addressing my father, I apologize for the interruption, but there are time-sensitive documents that require your attention. My father's jaw tightened. This is my son's wedding reception. Whatever it is can wait. I'm afraid it can't, sir. He withdrew a bound folder, pale blue cover embossed with the logo of Hastings & More LLP. These are official notifications regarding changes in the ownership structure of Whitmore Industries. As of 11:47 p.m. last night, controlling interest, 51% of voting shares, has been transferred to a new majority shareholder. The color drained from my father's face. He snatched the folder, flipped it open. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second, fingers trembling. This is a mistake, he said, voice hoarse. Some clerical error. I would have been notified. You're being notified now, Gerald said gently. The transactions were conducted through standard market channels over the past 18 months, all legally compliant, all documented. My father looked up, gaze swinging wildly across the room, landing on me. Who? I took a breath. Me. The word hung in the air like smoke. You? He barked out a laugh, shrill and disbelieving. You don't have that kind of capital. You're running some glorified IT shop. That glorified IT shop generated $42 million in revenue last year, I said evenly. I leveraged it, took loans, called in favors, bought your shares when they bottomed out after the Q3 earnings disaster. Then I waited. His hands shook as he gripped the folder. This is a hostile takeover. I'll fight it. It's done, Dad. I kept my voice soft, not cruel, just factual. The board meets Monday morning. They'll vote for new leadership. And, given your approval rating among the remaining shareholders is somewhere south of a root canal, I'm guessing they'll ask you to step aside. Someone gasped. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Claire's hand found mine again, squeezed once. My father stared at me, face cycling through shock, rage, something that might have been hurt if I didn't know him better. You did this to humiliate me. No, I did this to save the company you built, and I did it quietly, respectfully, until you decided to humiliate me in front of everyone I love. He opened his mouth, closed it. The folder slipped from his hands, pages scattering across the white tablecloth. Gerald cleared his throat. Mr. Whitmore, Richard, as majority shareholder, Daniel now has the authority to make executive decisions. He's asked me to present you with 2 options. He produced another document. Option 1. You accept a transition to Chairman Emeritus, advisory role, full pension, and we work together to stabilize the company. Option 2. You resign entirely, effective immediately, with a standard severance package. My father looked at the paper like it might bite him. You're giving me a choice? I'm giving you a chance, I said. More than one, actually. I've been asking you to listen for 5 years. You chose not to, so now we're here. The ballroom was so quiet I could hear the clink of ice in someone's water glass 3 tables over. My father's shoulders sagged just slightly, and for the first time in my life, he looked old. "Why today?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Because you made it about today. I didn't want this to happen here. I wanted to tell you privately after the honeymoon, offer you a path forward that didn't involve lawyers and public filings. But you couldn't let it go. You had to stand up in front of my wife, my friends, and call me a failure one more time." I paused. "So now everyone knows the failure just became your boss." He flinched. Claire stood beside me, slipped her arm through mine. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, calm and clear, "Daniel spent 6 months trying to reach out to you before the wedding. He called, he emailed, he even showed up at your office twice. You refused to see him. This isn't revenge, it's consequence." My father's gaze shifted to her, then back to me. Something in his expression cracked, just a hairline fracture. But enough. "I don't—" He stopped, swallowed. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it," I offered. "Take the weekend. Call Gerald on Monday. We'll figure it out." He nodded slowly, mechanically, and sank back into his chair. Gerald collected the scattered pages, tucked them into the folder, handed it to my father with a nod that was almost gentle. The room exhaled conspiracy. Eric stood, raised his glass. "Well," he said, grin creeping back, "I think we can all agree that was the most memorable wedding toast in recorded history. To Daniel and Claire, may your marriage be slightly less dramatic than this reception." Laughter, tentative at first, then genuine, rolled through the crowd. People clinked glasses. The tension broke like a fever. I turned to Claire. "I'm sorry." She shook her head, eyes shining. "Don't be. I married you because you're kind and brilliant and brave enough to do hard things. That just happened to include all 3 at once." The rest of the reception passed in a blur of handshakes, half-whispered congratulations, and a few pointed questions from guests who worked in finance and wanted to know how I'd pulled it off. I deflected most of them, kept my answers vague, and focused on Claire, on our first dance as a married couple, on cutting the cake, on stealing a quiet moment in the garden while the DJ played something upbeat and the crowd danced under string lights. My father left early. No goodbye, just a slow walk to the exit, Gerald at his side, the blue folder tucked under his arm like a shameful secret. I watched him go and felt nothing. No triumph, no guilt, just a hollow sort of relief. "You okay?" Claire asked, resting her head on my shoulder as we stood beneath a sprawling oak tree, the music a distant hum. "I will be," I said. She pulled back, studied my face. "Do you regret it, the timing?" I thought about it. No. If I'd waited, he would have found another moment to cut me down, and I would have taken it, because I always do. At least this way, it's over. "Is it, though?" she asked gently. "Over." I didn't have an answer for that. Monday morning arrived too fast. I sat in the Whitmore Industries boardroom at 8 a.m. sharp, Gerald on my left, 3 board members across the table. The room smelled like leather and old coffee. Sunlight slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany. Richard Whitmore's chair, usually at the head, sat empty. "He's not coming," one of the board members said. Marjorie Keene, 60-something, sharp eyes behind rimless glasses. "Sent his resignation this morning. Full severance, no advisory role." I exhaled slowly. He chose option 2. He did. Which leaves us with a question, Mr. Whitmore. You own controlling interest, but you've never run a manufacturing company. Whitmore Industries has 2,000 employees, 6 facilities, contracts with half the aerospace sector. It's not a software consultancy. I know. That's why I'm not planning to run it alone. I slid a folder across the table, my own this time, pale green, 30 pages of operational restructuring, hiring proposals, and a phased leadership transition plan I'd been drafting for 3 months. Marjorie opened it, scanned the first few pages. Her eyebrows rose. "You want to bring in an external COO?" "I do. Someone with aerospace experience, someone the existing teams trust. I'll focus on finance, technology integration, and long-term strategy, but I'm not interested in micromanaging departments I don't understand." I paused. I'm also proposing we reinstate the profit-sharing program my father cut 2 years ago and fund a training initiative for employees transitioning from legacy systems to digital workflows. One of the other board members, Tom Chen, younger, skeptical, leaned forward. That's expensive. It's an investment. Morale is in the gutter. Turnover is up 40%. If we don't rebuild trust, the company won't survive long enough to worry about expense. Marjorie closed the folder, met my eyes. You've thought this through. I've thought about nothing else for 18 months. She smiled, just slightly. Good. Then let's vote. The vote was unanimous. By noon, I was officially CEO of Whitmore Industries with a COO search underway and a PR team drafting a carefully worded statement about new leadership committed to innovation and employee welfare. I fielded a dozen calls from vendors, partners, and one very confused facilities manager who wanted to know if the rumor about the wedding toast was true. It's true, but we're moving forward, I said. That night, Claire and I sat on the couch in our apartment, takeout containers spread across the coffee table, the city lights glittering through the window. She'd changed out of her work clothes into sweatpants and one of my old college hoodies, hair pulled back in a messy bun. You're CEO now, she said, stealing a spring roll from my container. Apparently. How does it feel? I considered. Terrifying? Surreal? Like I just jumped off a cliff and I'm not sure if I'm flying or falling. She laughed, leaned against me. For what it's worth, I think you'll be great. You care about people. Your dad never did. He cared about the company. No, she said quietly. He cared about his legacy. There's a difference. I thought about that as I finished my spring roll, thought about the 2,000 employees whose livelihoods now rested in part on my decisions. Thought about my father, alone in whatever hotel or club he had retreated to, nursing his pride. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, then answered on impulse. Hello? Silence. Then, it's Dad. I sat up. Claire's eyes widened. Hi, I said, voice careful. I'm not calling to apologize, he said. No preamble, no small talk. I don't think I was wrong, but I'm calling because Gerald says I should and because your mother would have wanted me to. My mother had passed 6 years ago, cancer, quick and brutal. She'd been the only person who could soften my father's edges, and when she died, those edges had calcified into something sharp enough to cut. Okay, I said. He continued. I built that company from nothing, 40 years of my life, and you took it in 18 months. I countered, you let it decay in 2, but kept my tone even. I didn't take it, Dad. I saved it. Another silence. Maybe, he said finally. We'll see. And he hung up. Claire looked at me. Well, I think that's the closest I'll get to a truce, I said. She kissed my temple. Then it's a start.
3 months into my tenure as CEO, Whitmore Industries looked different. Not transformed, transformation takes years, but steadier. The new COO, a woman named Diane Ramirez with 20 years at Boeing, had come on board in week 5 and immediately started fixing the operational chaos my father had ignored. We'd reinstated profit sharing, launched a training program, and held a town hall at every facility to answer questions and hear concerns. The employees were skeptical at first. I didn't blame them. I was 32, looked younger, and had 0 manufacturing experience. But I showed up. Every site visit, I spent time on the floor, asked questions, listened, learned the names of the shift supervisors, the quirks of the equipment, the bottlenecks that slowed production. Slowly, cautiously, people started to believe I wasn't just another suit. Revenue stabilized. 2 major contracts we'd been on the verge of losing got renewed. The board stopped looking at me like I was a risky bet and started treating me like a colleague. But my father's absence hung over everything like a shadow. He'd taken the severance, moved to a condo in Miami, and as far as I knew, spent his days golfing and refusing to talk about Whitmore Industries. My half-sister Emily, his daughter from his second marriage, called me once to say he was fine but diminished, which felt about right. I didn't reach out. Part of me wanted to prove that the company was thriving without him, that I'd earned this, but another part, the part that remembered every dismissive comment, every rolled eye, every time he'd introduced me as my son who works with computers, stayed silent. Claire was more forgiving. "You should call him," she said one Saturday morning as we sat in our favorite coffee shop, the one with the wobbly tables and excellent espresso. Not to gloat, just to, I don't know, extend an olive branch. "Why?" I asked, stirring sugar into my cup. "Because he's your dad, and because you're not the kind of person who holds grudges." "Maybe I should be." She gave me a look. I sighed. "I'll think about it." A week later, Diane knocked on my office door, holding a printout. "You need to see this." I took it. It was a proposal, unsolicited, detailed 15 pages, for a partnership between Whitmore Industries and a mid-sized European aerospace firm looking to expand into the U.S. market. The terms were generous, the projections solid, and at the bottom, in the contact section, was my father's name. I stared at it. He sent this? Through a third party, but yeah, it's his work. I recognized the formatting. He used to write proposals exactly like this. Why? She shrugged. Maybe he's bored. Maybe he misses it. Maybe he's trying to help without admitting he's trying to help. I read through it again slower this time. It was good. Really good. The kind of strategic thinking that had built Whitmore Industries back when my father still cared about growth instead of control. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think it's worth exploring. And I think it's his way of saying he's not completely out." That night, I called him. He picked up on the third ring. "Daniel, I got your proposal." A pause. "And?" "It's solid. I want to move forward." Another pause. Longer this time. "You're not going to ask why I sent it." "I assume you sent it because you think it's a good deal, and because you still care about the company, even if you won't admit it." He huffed out a breath, something that might have been a laugh. "Diane was always too smart for her own good." "She said the same about you." Silence. Then quieter. "I was wrong about you." I almost dropped the phone. "What?" "At the wedding, and before, I was wrong. The words sounded like they were being dragged out of him with pliers, but they were there. You're doing a better job than I did. The board likes you. The employees like you. Revenue's up. Dad, let me finish." He cleared his throat. "I don't know how to... I'm not good at this. Your mother was. But she's gone, and I'm here, and I'm telling you, I was wrong. You're not a failure. You never were. I just..." He stopped. "I didn't know how to let you be something I didn't understand." I closed my eyes, felt something hot prickling behind my eyelids. "Thank you," I managed. "Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing. And if you ever want to grab lunch, talk strategy or whatever, I'm around. I'd like that." Okay, I'll let you go." "Dad?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you called." He hung up without answering, but I heard the catch in his breath before the line went dead. Claire found me 20 minutes later, still sitting with the phone in my hand, staring at nothing. "What happened?" she asked. I told her. She smiled, kissed the top of my head. "See? Olive branch." "He's still an ass." "Of course he is, but he's your ass." I laughed despite myself, pulled her down on the couch beside me. We sat there in the quiet, the city humming outside, and for the first time in months I felt like maybe, just maybe, things might actually be okay.
A year after the wedding, Claire and I hosted a small dinner party at our new house. A modest craftsman with a porch swing and a backyard big enough for the dog we were planning to adopt. The guest list was short. Eric and his girlfriend,
Diane and her wife, my half-sister Emily and her husband, and my father. He'd arrived early, holding a bottle of wine and looking uncomfortable in khakis and a sweater instead of his usual suit. I met him at the door, and for a moment, we just stood there. "Thanks for coming," I said. "Thanks for inviting me," he replied. It wasn't much, but it was something. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Laughter, overlapping conversations, Diane telling a story about a factory mishap that had everyone in stitches. My father sat at the far end of the table, mostly quiet, but I caught him smiling once or twice when he thought no one was looking. After dessert, he and I ended up on the back porch, beers in hand, watching fireflies drift across the yard. "You've done well," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the house, the life Claire and I had built. "Better than I thought." "Thanks, I think." He chuckled. "I mean it. The company's in good shape, you and Diane make a solid team, and that European partnership I proposed, best decision I ever made." "Second best," I corrected. "First was stepping aside and letting someone else lead." He winced, but didn't argue. We stood there in companionable silence, the kind I never thought we'd have. The dog we had adopted the week before, a mutt named Biscuit with one floppy ear, wandered out and flopped at my feet. "You know," my father said slowly, "I used to think success meant control, building something and never letting go. But watching you this past year, I think maybe I had it backwards." "How so?" He said success isn't holding on. It's knowing when to hand it over to someone who'll do it better. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. He drained his beer, set the bottle on the porch railing. "I'm proud of you, Daniel. I should have said it a long time ago, but I'm saying it now." The words landed heavy and bright, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Thanks, Dad." He clapped me on the shoulder, brief, awkward, genuine, and headed back inside. Claire appeared a moment later, slipping her arms around my waist from behind. "How'd it go?" "Better than I expected." "Good." She rested her chin on my shoulder. "You deserved that." I turned, kissed her forehead. We both did. The party wound down around midnight. My father left with a promise to call about the quarterly reports. Diane hugged us both and declared the evening a roaring success, and Emily whispered that she'd never seen Dad so relaxed. When the last guest had gone, Claire and I collapsed onto the couch, Biscuit wedged between us, the house quiet, except for the hum of the dishwasher. "So," she said, grinning, "how does it feel to have your dad's approval?" I thought about it. About the wedding toast, the blue folder, the year of building something better from the wreckage of something broken. "It feels," I said slowly, "like I don't need it anymore, but I'm glad I have it." She laughed, kissed me. "That's very emotionally mature of you." "I try." We sat there as the clock ticked past midnight, and I thought about the company, steady now, growing, led by people who cared, and about my father, learning to let go. About Claire, who'd stood beside me through every impossible moment. About the fact that failure, real failure, isn't falling short of someone else's expectations. It's never trying at all. And I'd tried. God, I'd tried. And somehow, against all odds, it had worked. Biscuit snored. Claire's head grew heavy on my shoulder. Outside, the fireflies blinked on and off, tiny beacons in the dark. I closed my eyes and let the quiet settle around me, warm and whole. Maybe this was what success looked like, after all.